Hopefully you don't go to sleep now. That would be awkward if you did. If you did. I need my clicker. Somebody can pass that to me. Let's talk. This is, for me, a personal topic because my brother, who I want to see in heaven, subscribes to the gospel, subjective, moral reasoning. It's a big title. I don't even know what those words mean, but I'm going to talk about it though. This is the issue with my brother. My brother is not a project. He is a person, and he is far from God, and I want to see him in heaven. So as I do ministry in the cities, and we do evangelism in the city, there's something that changed the way I operate. And I'm going to put it in the screen for you. You have to, it's going to work eventually. These are different styles of working for people who are far from God. People in the city. Some people work for the city. But when you're always doing stuff for people, you create a culture of dependence and not gratitude. Some people do ministry to the city. I call that drive-by compassion, where we go in a community twice a year and we give out some veggie turkeys, because real turkeys are not good enough, and we feel good about ourselves. Some people do ministry versus the city. I'm amazed at the level of vitriol towards people that are living lives far from God. It's always surprising to me why we need to curse the darkness instead of just turning on lights. It's troubling to me. That is concerning to us when pagans act like pagans. Like that's what they're supposed to do. They're pagans. Ministry versus the city. Or ministry outside the city. Cities are not places to be abandoned. We must not leave the city. We must love the city. So when it clicked for me is when I understood is that I must do ministry with the city. And for that, I need to see people as persons, not projects. So what works? I do 6, 7 evangelistic series a year. Most of them are in cities. First thing I like to share with you are my assumptions. I assume that when I'm preaching to people who are far from God, there are 3 things about them that I must understand. Number 1, it's going to be more difficult to connect our worldviews because they are further away than people used to. It used to be that people had this general understanding that there is a God and Jesus was his son. It used to be that we had a general understanding about Christian values. That is no longer the case, especially in younger persons. I assume that people have an adversarial attitude towards church. When people see news on TV, even though we pride ourselves not being like Catholics or other denominations, when lost people see Christians in the news, they bunch us up all together. So I assume people that they have an adversarial relationship towards the church. That's why I find it extremely important, essential, and necessary in my presentations when I'm preaching to lost people about the gospel to do something very simple, and that is to apologize for church hurt. Behind every heresy, there's a hurt. Something as simple as saying, maybe you grew up in a household where they push religion down your throat. Every time I say that, I have people after person come and talk to me at the end and tell me, yeah, that was my experience. That's the reason why I rejected everything that had to do with church. I assume that people are further, that they're antagonistic, and it's going to take a longer time. Evangelism takes time. And the further somebody is away from God, the longer it's going to take. So I want you to understand something. I share this with my dialogue this afternoon. I want to share something with you which is very important. If we're trying to reach a secular mind and present the gospel, I want you to understand something that is, if you don't hear anything I say tonight, remember this. For a secular person, especially a younger secular person, who's of high interest to me because I have 4 millennials that I am a father to. And I want to make sure they're in heaven with me along with their friends. For a secular person, the higher value is not truth, it's justice. So they don't care first whether something is true, but whether something is just. And if they see the church as being a part of the oppressive system, if they see the church, because today is not just important for us to be silent non-racist. We have to be anti-racist. You have to be overtly non-racist. Your silence is assumed to be complicitous behavior. That's a big word. I'm Hispanic, but it came out, right? It's not important for us to be silent. It's interesting that when I say life before birth matters, some of my friends congratulate me for speaking truth. But when I say black lives matter, you're getting too political. Either all life matters from conception all the way to death, or no life matters. So it's important for us to understand that when we are speaking truth, you can't follow the donkey or the elephant, you have to follow the lamb. And people have to you have to understand, if you're preaching to secular people, they have this perception. You are not starting the game 0-0. You're down 2 goals. So you can understand you're down 2 touchdowns. If you're a Tampa Bay fan, you're down 3 touchdowns. Because your quarterback is not good. You have to be vocal. Because the higher value is justice. That's why when I preach the Sabbath, I preach about justice in the Sabbath. It's in there. Sabbath is a great equalizer. On Sabbath, everybody's the same. The rich next to the poor, and the immigrant next to the native born, and the man next to the woman. On Sabbath, everybody is the same. We have a precious truth we need to share with the world, but we're focused on whether who receives the mark or not, while we have all this other stuff about balance and equality that's in that commandment that we don't even mention. So that's my assumptions. So what are the barriers to preaching the gospel to a secular mind? I find 4 barriers. 4 barriers. Number 1, our ethos. We have to be honest with ourselves. No matter how much we want to play revisionist history, We haven't been cool with the people in the cities. It's in our ethos. We'd rather leave the city than love the city. Dens of iniquity. Even though Ellen White, out of every 4 quotes, only 1 is negative towards the city, we pick on those. So it's in our ethos. I didn't grow up loving the city. It's a place to be shunned. It's a place where all the iniquities are at. It's a place where all the sin happens. But sin happens in the country too. It's in our ethos. So you're going to have some headwinds. It's in our ethos. I have been in the inner city churches, which is the second one, where most of our churches that are inner city churches are drive-in churches, that we go and worship and leave. And if we stop worshiping in that church, nobody would miss us because they only see us once a week. So it's in our ethos. So people can tell when they're just projects and not persons. Barriers. I have to ask myself if my higher value as a Christian is people. Follow me for a moment. Because it seems elementary that people are the reason we exist. But we have idols that take the way of people. Idols like property. Property is not more important than people. People are more important than property. I was a pastor in an inner city church where we had a lot of gang banging. This is the 80s. A lot of people from El Salvador and Central America moved into that city. So I had all my kids from church gang banging, clubbing. So I had an idea. Let's start some soccer games in the basement of the church on Saturday night. And let's play until they're dead tired. We'll feed them haystacks because we're Adventists. And we did it. There was over 100 kids playing soccer Saturday night in the church. We stopped playing at 2 in the morning. Nobody wanted to go clubbing at 2 in the morning. Everybody was dead tired. So I said, I'm keeping my kids off the street until we had board meeting. Oh, mercy. Who did the scuff marks on the wall? They left a bag of trash out. This is the sanctuary. Because we have this erroneous idea that the church is a modern-day sanctuary. That's a most holy place and then the holy place. And it's like a wrong concept of what church is actually supposed to be. I mean, they ate me alive. In their minds, scuff on walls was more important than bullets on people. So if I'm going to reach people in the city, I have to understand that these are some headwinds. It's in our ethos. We drive into stuff. We have to ask ourselves, are people more important than property? Are people more important than politics? Are people more important than the past? Are people more important than programs? Are people more important than policy? If there's a conflict between policy and people, we don't create more policy. We change it so people can flourish. So what do we do then? What are the action steps? What are the action steps? You see there on the screen, the first one, change the way I do evangelism. It used to be, if you wanted to do evangelism, you start with Christ, then you bring him into community, and then if the church had a cause, you would do it. I think evangelism that I'm seeing work today, you start not with Christ, but with a cause. And every community has causes we can get behind. This is where you, remember, higher priority is justice. So if I'm linking up with you, my next door neighbor was invited to church by us, never wanted to go. We had a march against violence. She said, when is it? Pick me up. Cause, then community, then Christ. We're going to get to Christ, but we don't lead with Christ because we don't want to put up walls. We want to build bridges. Cause. People want to belong before they believe. That's why it doesn't matter if somebody's baptized or not. There are places in your church a person who's not a member yet can serve. I believe there's only two places in the church a non-Christian can't do. One is teach, one is lead worship. Everything else, you can have heathens. They're probably nicer than the ones you have. If I'm preaching at the same time, when I'm preaching to secular people, at the same time, if I'm preaching in the city, at the same time, I have to deconstruct and inspire. I have to talk to the rich person and say, you think you have all these things and that's going to get you somewhere, but it's not. But at the same time, I have to inspire and let people know that don't have anything, that God has hope for them. Number three, when I invite people to join the church, I don't invite them to join an institution. I invite them to join a family because we get family dysfunction. But people are anti-institution. It's just a slight change in language that creates a feeling of, yeah, I get the family concept. And number four, if I'm going to be successful in reaching people that are far from God, I have to be confident but not cocky. Being the remnant makes us special, doesn't make us better. Confidence inspires. You don't have to have a wishy-washy faith where you don't have any beliefs. You just can't be cocky about it. Like I'm better than anybody else. You ever met somebody who's cocky? I know you're spiritual and everything. Don't you get like happy when they fail? You're like, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Good. I want to be confident in my faith, but I don't want to be cocky. I want to act with humility. So, I want to see my brother in heaven. Next time you talk to somebody who is far from God, remember, you could be talking to my brother. He's not your project. He's a person. Thank you very much.